Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Um, Let me get all my little side notes pulled up. Welcome to Sunday school. I hope you've all had a great week. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Come on in. Find you a seat, grab some coffee and a donut. As we get started this morning, I would just like to personally thank again Brother Robbie for putting this beautiful screen up for us and made it so easy to plug into this morning. Didn't have any technical difficulties, and I even got here early just in case. And we did not have any. Thank you, Brother Robbie. That is so appreciative, and it just had me sitting all day yesterday making slides just so I could use it. So we're going to start this study on altars. As you can see, it's titled up here. This today, I hope you don't go to sleep on me. That's why I made slides, so y'all have something to look at. We're going to be setting the foundation. So it will be in the Old Testament today. We'll be looking at altars through a timeline, and we're going to be setting the groundwork for how that moves into present day, okay? But I feel like it's very important for us to have that basis of, what is an altar? Why? How? When? Where? All those things. And so that's what we're going to do today. We're going to establish what altars were in the Old Testament. So we'll be in Genesis and Exodus mostly today. I have most of the scriptures up on the slide, so if you're taking notes, and you want to go back and reference this, absolutely, you can do that. It's a lot of information. I'm going to do my best to not be boring. Y'all know I don't like boring, so I'm going to do my best to not be boring today. And so as we start, we're going to just start with the basics, which is, what is an altar? Okay. Thank you, Google. All right, so the Hebrew word for meaning of altar is a place of slaughter or sacrifice. Place of slaughter or sacrifice. The definition is a raised place of sacrifice, worship, and remembrance. Now, this is very important. We have three words here: sacrifice, worship, remembrance, or you could use the word memorial. Okay? Oh. I just have to, yeah. Sorry, guys. Man, I thought we was going to get through without technical difficulties. Thank you. Okay. This laptop, by the way, is from the Stone Ages, so the battery doesn't last long anyway. And so we want to remember that. Sacrifice, worship, remembrance, or you could put memorial there, because those are the three different ways that altars, that why they had an altar, created an altar, those kinds of things, okay? An altar represents a meeting place between God and man. Now, there are a few instances in the Bible, and I thought I had missed one because I didn't add it in here, where men created covenants between themselves. Laban and Jacob is an example of that. And so I was like, oh, I missed one. And I went back and read it, and I was like, no, that was a covenant, but that was a covenant between two people. And so for that sake, I didn't add it in here. But the ones we're focusing on, altars that are built, were a meeting place between God and man. Okay? Original altars were made of earth or stacked stones. And we have scripture for that. Original altars between Jehovah, Yahweh, God, and man were made originally of earth and stacked stones. And so in Exodus 20:24 through 25 here, it says, an altar of earth you shall make for me, and sacrifice it on your burnt offerings and your peace offerings, your sheep and your oxen. In every place where I cause my name to be remembered, I will come to you and bless you. If you make me an altar of stone, you shall not build it of hewn stones, for if you wield your tool on it, you profane it. Now this is important, because false gods, altars unto false gods, were very elaborate. They were carved. They were all about design and ornate and all of those things. The true living God, altars unto him were to be natural as possible, okay? And so it says, you profane it. Deuteronomy 27:5 says, and there you shall build an altar to the Lord your God, an altar of stones. You shall wield no iron tool on them. So he was important enough that he gave those directions. Welcome, everybody. Come on in. Come on in. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Yes, we have several guests this morning. I see one that I know. Miss Michelle's here. Good to see you, lady. I'm so good to see you. Come on in the house. We are beginning a study here in Sunday school on altars. And that's where we are. We're talking about altars and what they actually are, the biblical definition of an altar, and what they were made of. They needed to be made of earth or stacked stones. And this gets us up until the tabernacle, okay? This gets us up until the tabernacle. All right. So our first altar that we encounter is Noah. And most of you probably knew that. But in Genesis 8:20 through 21, it says, Noah built an altar to the Lord and took some of every clean animal and some of every clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And when the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma, the Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground because of man, for the intention of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I ever again strike down every living creature as I have done. I don't know how that got off. All right, so where was this altar created? Mount Ararat. That's where the Noah's Ark landed. Once the waters went down, he landed there at Mount Ararat. The significance, meaning behind this altar was thanksgiving sacrifice for deliverance. He delivered them from the flood. Okay? He delivered them from the flood, and this altar was not named. Now, not all the altars were named. We are going to learn names of altars, so you're going to learn where some of the things that we say around here, you're going to learn where that originated from, which I thought is really cool. So, if you're not a history person like me, and you don't care about all this, no, listen, my spoken scripture is about wisdom and knowledge, and how it's more precious than jewels and better than, gold. It's like having a necklace around your neck. And so I feel like, I know growing up, because I grew up in church, I learned a lot of things, but there was no context behind it. I didn't understand why things were said the way they said, where we got things from. And so it's important to me now to have the knowledge, the understanding, the wisdom behind why we do what we do.
for instance, we're a Pentecostal or we're an apostolic church. Well, what does that mean? That's biblical. It comes from the Bible. That wasn't man-made, okay? Although, people take it and run with it and make denominations out of it. But the actual terminology and meaning is biblical. And so everything that we do should be founded on the Word. And so we want to make sure that, we need to have knowledge of where those things come from. So I've got a little picture up here. Now, this may look and represent what an altar that Noah built would look like. Okay? Obviously, we don't know exactly. They have, I was looking at so much archaeological digs and things that they have found, and that's really cool. I didn't have time to dive into all that to find out exactly, what and where and how and why. I know Jacob's pillar, I've got a picture of that in a minute. But, if you want to even get more into it, there's plenty more you can dive into this. All right, our next person is Abram. Abram's first altar, and I did not put the place on this, and I don't know why. But this was at Shechem. And so we're in Genesis 12, 6 through 7. Abram passed through the land to the place at Shechem, to the oak of Moreh. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land. And then the Lord appeared to Abram, and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." So he built there an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. Okay, once again, there's going to be a common theme, because an altar was a place where God meets man. Okay? So this is where God met Abram. The significance of this is it was a covenant, promise, and worship, and this one was not specifically named. Then we're going to go to Genesis 12, verse 8. And from there he moved to the hill country on the east of Bethel, and he pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord, and he called upon the name of the Lord. And here this was prayer and dependence, and he did not name this one as well. And then in Genesis 13 and 18, so Abram moved his tent and came and settled by the oaks of Mamre, which are at Hebron, and there he built an altar to the Lord. And in this instance, this was renewed fellowship with God. Now, you can do a study on what was going on in Abram's life. That's not what we're doing today, but listen. It's so easy to just go off, It's like, oh, well, he was here, and then he was there, and then, God said do this and that. Yes, you can get all of that for today's lesson. I kind of had to keep reeling myself back in. But anyway, the first one was at Shechem. The second one was at Bethel and Ai. And then the third one was at Hebron. Okay? Those were the places. That is not on the screen. So if you want to write that down, you can. All those places are where Abram met with the Lord, and he built an altar. Now it's Abraham. Same person, but in between Genesis, it's actually Genesis 17, I think, God changed Abram's name to Abraham. Okay? You can go read about that whole instance. It's very interesting. Anyway, we don't have time to delve into all of it, and I'm sorry. Okay, Abraham, Genesis 22, 9 through 14. And when they came to the place of which God had told him, Abraham built the altar there, and he laid the wood in order, and he bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. And then Abraham reached out his hand. He took the knife to slaughter his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, "Abraham, Abraham." And he said, "Here I am." And he said, "Do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God, seeing you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me." And Abraham lifted up his eyes, and he looked, and behold, behind him was a ram, caught in a thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram, and he offered it as a burnt offering instead of his son. And so Abraham called the name of the place, "The Lord will provide." As it is said to this day, on the mount of the Lord it shall be provided. And so he named that Jehovah Jireh, the Lord will provide. How many of you heard the term Jehovah Jireh? We have a song. We have maybe a couple songs we have that term in. We say it here when in prayer. Jehovah Jireh, the Lord will provide. This is where this came from. This was Abraham naming this place where God saved his son from having to be sacrificed. He trusted the Lord so much that he led his son up that hill, built the altar, bound his son up, put him there, and he was willing to sacrifice his child. Now, I don't know about y'all. Yes. I don't know about y'all, but that would be, that would be extremely, extremely difficult. So, this is where he was testing. And God came through. And we say that a lot. Jehovah Jireh, the Lord will provide. And in prayer, I use it. If I'm praying for a situation that I need Lord to provide, you're Jehovah Jireh, the Lord will provide. And so now I know that this is where that came from. All right? It wasn't just made up. It wasn't somebody just, decided, hey, let's call him Jehovah Jireh. It was an altar created and built in covenant with God, that he saved Isaac in that moment from having to be slaughtered.
And Crystal, I've heard a preacher preach, and this just impacted me so much, that there was a reason that the ram was caught in the thicket, which was basically the briars and the thorns.
Mm-hmm.
And he basically said that the Lord used the curse that was placed on Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden to trap the answer. To trap the answer for Abraham. That basically it was a curse to him. The thorns in the thicket was a curse to man. But that's what he used to trap that ram that he was going to use to sacrifice instead of his son.
Wow.
And that was just like, that kind of took my breath away. That the Lord would use the very thing that was supposed to curse him.
Yes.
To bless him.
Right.
In that moment. To
Right.
provide for him.
Right. And then that also goes with, it's foreshadowing Jesus coming and sacrificing himself.
Right.
And then what was his crown?
Yes, his crown thorns. Yes, and that was what he also added.
Y'all, God didn't waste a thing in here.
Not wasted.
Not a thing. Nothing is wasted, ever. Nothing is ever wasted.
He doesn't waste anything in our circumstances.
No, he does not. Absolutely. And so I pray that I would have the faith of Abraham, that I could take one of my own children. Whew. I'm not going to cry because, man, that would be tough. But he trusted God enough that even if God didn't deliver him, he could raise him up, or he would use it for another purpose. So we're moving on to Isaac. So we have Genesis 26, 23 through 25. From there he went up to Beersheba, and the Lord appeared to him the same night, said, I am the God of Abraham your father. Fear not, for I am with you, and will bless you, and multiply your offspring for my servant Abraham's sake. So he built an altar there, and called upon the name of the Lord, and pitched his tent there, and there Isaac's servants dug a well. This takes me back. The whole meaning of Abraham's name being changed, it goes from, he was going to be the father of many. That's why it went from Abram to Abraham. Abraham means the father of many. And then that gets passed on to Isaac, his son, that he says, you and multiply your offspring for my servant Abraham's sake. So he's still keeping his word. Abraham's gone, but he's still keeping his word through his son Isaac. So, why is that important? Because the meaning of this place where he built this altar is God's faithfulness to generations. God's faithfulness to generations. And this happened in Beersheba. And this did not have a specific name. All right, Jacob.
Let's move on to Jacob. Genesis 18 through 22. So early in the morning, Jacob took the stone that he had put under his head, and he set it up for a pillar and poured oil on top of it. That is significant. We don't have time to get into it. All right, so there was, he didn't have anything to sacrifice. He took what he had, which was the oil, and he poured it on the stone that represented, he made a vow to serve the Lord there. And at this place, he called it, this was Bethel. Now, it was called, the city where they were was Luz, L-U-Z. He renames it Bethel because of this. If God, this is the vow, he said, if God will be with me and will keep me in this way that I go and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear so that I can come again to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God. And this stone, which I have set up for a pillar, shall be God's house. And all that you give me, I will give a full tenth to you. Bethel means house of God. He's making that whole place God's house. And it was a personal vow to serve God. That just gives me chill bumps. And so, yes, this was a memorial stone set up. This was after Jacob's dream that he had with the ladder. Does everybody know that story? Okay, so this was after he had the dream, then he builds this altar, and it was one large stone, and it was a pillar, and he took it, he had slept on it, and then he took it and he raised it up. Genesis 33:18 through 20. The next altar that Jacob built, he came to the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, on his way from Padan Aram, and he camped before the city. And the sons of Hamor, Shechem's father, he bought for 100 pieces of money the piece of land on which he had pitched his tent, and there he erected an altar, and he called it El Elohe Israel. Now, anytime you see El, it means God. So he named it El Elohe Israel, which means God, the God of Israel. That's like exclamation. God, the God of Israel. This is who he is. And this was a confession of God's lordship. He was establishing that God is the God of Israel. And he did that right here in Shechem at El Elohe Israel. Yes. Right. Exactly. And then also that was after his reconciliation with Esau. So remember, he had to run and get away from his brother. He has the dream. That was the first altar. He reconciles in between there. Okay? And so him and Esau reconcile. He builds that altar. And then this third altar is he had left Bethel. Now he's gone back to Bethel. Okay? And he says to Jacob, arise, go up to Bethel and dwell there. Make an altar there to the God who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau. So he's reminding him. So Jacob said to his household and to all who were with him, put away the foreign gods that are among you and purify yourselves and change your garments. Then let us arise and go up to Bethel so that I may make there an altar to God who answers me in the day of my distress and has been with me wherever I have gone. And so they gave to Jacob all the foreign gods that they had, the rings that were in their ears, and Jacob hid them under their terebinth tree that was near Shechem. And as they journeyed, a terror from God fell upon the cities that were around them so that they did not pursue the sons of Jacob. And Jacob came to Luz, which was Bethel. Remember, he named that Bethel in the land of Canaan. And he and all the people were with him. And there he built an altar. And he calls this place El Bethel. Now, who remembered what Bethel meant? House of God. This is God of the house of God. So he did another exclamation. You know what this tells me? And he struggled. he struggled with staying true to what he knew. So it was like God was like, okay, I'm God. Now I'm God of the God. And now I'm God of the house. Remember, Jacob? Remember what I taught you? Remember what I showed you? Listen, God will do whatever he's got to do to get our attention. Right? And so I feel like this was him just trying to just establish to Jacob, I am the God. Not just, but the God of the house of God. And so this means the significance was renewal of covenant, cleansing, and revival. Okay? Now, this is that. So I found this picture, and this could possibly be like the stone that Jacob used to lay his head on and then to erect, to put it into a pillar form. And so I thought that was really cool. I'm not here telling y'all that that's exactly the one. That's not what I'm doing. But it just gives us visuals of, sometimes we read things and we're like, wonder what that looked like, or wonder what that meant, or whatever. So I like visuals, so I included that. So that's an example of what that could have looked like. All right, on to Moses. We are now in Exodus chapter 17 and verse 15. And this one's real simple. And Moses built an altar and called the name of the Lord. The name of it, the Lord is my banner. The Lord is my banner. So they had been in battle with Amalek. And there was victory. Okay? And so at this point is where he's building this altar. The Lord is my banner. And it was for God's protection and victory. That's what that altar established as a memorial. And then down in Exodus 24, this one's very significant. A lot of you know what happens here at Mount Sinai. He writes down all the words of the Lord. He rose early in the morning, and he built an altar at the foot of the mountain and 12 pillars according to the 12 tribes of Israel. And he sent young men of the people of Israel who offered burnt offerings and sacrificed peace offerings of oxen to the Lord. And Moses took half of the blood and he put it in basins, and half of the blood he threw against the altar. And then he took the book of the covenant, which he had just written, and read it in the hearing of the people, and they said, all that the Lord has spoken we will do, we will be obedient. And Moses took the blood and threw it on the people and said, behold the blood of the covenant that the Lord has made with you in accordance with all these words. This happened at Sinai. It was to seal the covenant that he had just given Moses. Maybe one of y'all know this. About how many Israelites are we talking about here? How many? Yeah, where Moses. How many Israelites you think there were? I mean, at one time there's like 350,000. I don't know. How does one person get up and speak to that many people and they all hear it? Okay. So then that person would hear and repeat to this group of people. I meant to look that up. I had a thing to look that up, and I didn't. I'm wondering. That's like the little telephone thing you do in people's ear, and by the time it gets around, it's not exactly what was said. I don't know. I thought that was, you think about it, for instance, when they come to the Red Sea, or all the different times where there was a lot of them. All right, next. Here we are at the tabernacle. This one's fun.
That's why Jethro told Moses that he needed to appoint certain people because he was trying to do it all himself, and it was wearing him out. And he basically said, you need to appoint elders, and you need to meet with the elders and let the elders go meet with the people. So basically, it wasn't all that he was standing out and saying it all at one time. He would meet with the elders. The elders went and met with the groups of people.
Gotcha. Makes perfect sense. Okay. So, remember that last altar, the blood was not just sprinkled on the altar, it was sprinkled on the people too. All right, I promise all this is going to come together. It will all come together. All right, now we're in the tabernacle. So, up until this point, they're in the wilderness, by the way. Children of Israel are in the wilderness. They're roaming around, and God wants them to build the tabernacle now. And it's got to be where you can pick it up and move it, right? Because they were moving around in the wilderness. Cloud by day, pillar of fire by night. Okay? And so he wants them to build, he tells Moses how he wants this brazen altar to be built. And so we're in Exodus 27. You shall make the altar of acacia wood 5 cubits long. So this turns out to be 7.5 feet by 7.5 feet. 5 cubits broad. The altar shall be square, and its height shall be 3 cubits. And you shall make horns for it on its 4 corners. And its horns shall be of one piece with it, and you shall overlay it with bronze. And you shall make pots for it to receive its ashes, and shovels, and basins, and forks, and fire pans. And you shall make all its utensils of bronze. And you shall also make it for a grating, a network of bronze. And on the net you shall make your 4 bronze rings at its 4 corners. And you shall set it under the ledge of the altar, so that the net extends halfway down the altar. And you shall make poles for the altar, poles of acacia wood, and overlay them with bronze. And the poles shall be put through the ring, so that the poles are on 2 sides of the altar when it is carried. And you shall make it hollow with boards, and it shall be shown you on the mountain, so shall it be made. Go down to 40:29, and he set the altar of burnt offering at the entrance of the tabernacle of the tent of meeting, and he offered it on the burnt offering and the grain offering as the Lord had commanded Moses. Now, this one is first constructed in the tabernacle, okay? That's the place where it was. Well, they were in the wilderness. And this was going to be the central place of sacrifice during the wilderness wanderings, atonement, and access to God. All right? So, they're kind of bringing it all to one place now. Bronze. Why bronze? Anybody know? Bronze was a symbol of righteousness and judgment. It's an alloy combination, and I'm trying to remember what it was. It's 2 metals that come together to make bronze. Anybody know? Aluminum and copper. That sounds right. I think aluminum was one for sure. Copper probably what gives it that color. Okay? This was the first object you saw when you entered the tabernacle. Does anybody not know what the outline of what the tabernacle looked like? Anybody? I didn't do anyway, I may try to have that next week. But anyway, when you entered into the tabernacle, the first thing you saw was this big brazen altar. Okay? And it actually was it was raised. It was raised up on either rocks or a mound of dirt, I guess depending on where they were, where they landed, what they would use. And so that still, it was on a raised place. Okay? The horns on the 4 corners, so they would put the animal on the altar and they would tie it down, and they used those horns, and those horns represented God's power. So here's some visuals that will kind of give you an idea of what it could have looked like. There would have needed to be a ramp to go up because it was, see the little man right there? I think they put it was a 6-foot man maybe, and they're showing you the scale of kind of what it would look like and all the things that were made. Isn't that cool? And do you imagine that God just sat there and spoke every little word out to him about what needed to be done? I just think that's amazing. So bronze was a symbol of righteousness and judgment. So when this created into a slide, it distorted some of my stuff because that was not like that. Sorry, guys. Anywho, these are depictions of what that altar would have looked like. And so Moses was in charge of making sure that that was erected correctly in the tabernacle as they wandered through the wilderness. All right, and then there was another altar inside the tabernacle. Whew, this is a good one. The altar of incense. Let's read about it. Exodus 30. You shall make an altar on which to burn incense. You shall make it of acacia wood. A cubit shall be its length, and a cubit its breadth. It shall be square, and 2 cubits shall be its height. Its horn shall be of one piece with it. You shall overlay it with pure gold, its top, around its sides, and its horns, and you shall make a molding of gold around it. And you shall make 2 golden rings for it. Under its moldings on 2 opposite sides of it you shall make them, and they shall be holders for poles with which to carry it. It had to be transferable, remember, because they're moving around the wilderness. You shall make the poles of acacia wood and overlay them with gold, and you shall put it in front of the veil that is above the ark of the testimony, in front of the mercy seat that is above the testimony, where I will meet with you. Once again, he's still sticking to what the meaning of an altar is. And Aaron shall burn fragrant incense on it. Every morning when he dresses the lamps, he shall burn it. And when Aaron sets up the lamps at twilight, he shall burn it. A regular incense offering before the Lord throughout your generations. You shall not offer unauthorized incense on it, or a burnt offering, or a grain offering, and you shall not pour a drink offering on it. And Aaron shall make atonement on its horns once a year. With the blood of the sin offering of atonement, he shall make atonement for it once in the year throughout your generations. It is most holy to the Lord. And then Exodus 40:26, he put the golden altar in the tent of meeting before the veil. So there's a whole significance with the tabernacle and how we actually approach. So the most holy of holy place behind the veil was the very last thing that only the priest could enter. And in order to get to that, there were things that had to be done. It started with the sacrifice at the beginning, the one that's outside, the one that we just saw. And then it goes all the way up to this one where nothing was to be sacrificed on it. When we come to God in prayer, in worship, we're going to get to this, altars and worship. And we've talked about worship. We've talked about idols. We've had a lot of lessons on that lately, praise, worship. But there's a process in coming to God, in our request and in our worship and in our praise. And it should always start with sacrifice. It should always start with submitting and laying things down that don't belong and allowing God to burn that up out of you. And then, there's the washing and there's all the things. But then when this altar was to never go out. The incense represented praise, the worship of the people, the continuous praise and worship of the people rising to God. He never wanted that to end. He never wanted there was to never be a time where incense was not going up as a sweet aroma. He had a specific type of incense. He told them, don't use things that are not authorized. Only use what is pleasing to me. And if our worship going up, first of all, it needs to be continual. We've talked about this. Worship is not coming to church on Sunday morning and singing with the worship team for 15 minutes. That's not worship. It can be a part of your worship. That's not the only thing worship is. Worship is to be a sacrificial, continually ongoing, sweet aroma unto our King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Yes. Absolutely not. Right. Yes. It's the only way.
I mean, they're all significant, but you just make a huge turn
Yes.
once you add that second, because nobody had access
Right.
to that second altar until now.
Right. And most altars leading up to this point were places of memorial and covenant. They were not places of sacrifice. I think only one other one was a sacrifice. Was that?
No, there were several. I mean, the place where Abraham was, that was.
Yes, you're right. You're right. Abraham, and there was another one that Moses did. Yeah.
Even Abraham knew that there was actually not going to be the death of his son, because he told the men before he went up,
Yeah.
me and the boy are going to go, and
We'll return.
we're both going to
Yes. But up to then, the majority of those were memorials, covenant type altars. And although God met them in those places, what pleased him, where he says it's pleasing to me, right, and that's what he's saying. There was no, this one wasn't anything like.
We're starting to see something more intimate.
Right. That's exactly right.
We're starting to get into relationship.
Yes.
And actual presence.
Yes.
Even though it was still, I mean, people were scared to death of God.
Yeah.
I mean, they were scared to death.
Right.
Go up there
Very
and
fair.
talk to God, we're going to stay down here.
Exactly.
You're doing a great job.
Yeah.
Pat him on the back.
Right. Absolutely.
But yeah, it did represent an incredible change.
Absolutely.
When I go in there today, I'm gonna definitely take a heart of repentance. But I'm also gonna offer up praise and worship unto God.
Absolutely.
It's a different altar completely.
It is. It is. And that's why I wanted us, and there are different types of altars. Some people,
Moving more into an altar of communion,
yes.
because he also had the shipwreck there.
Yes. Some people, though, get stuck. They get stuck at an altar of repentance and sacrifice.
Yes.
And they do not know how to move. I've done this and I've done that. God, I'm sorry. And they don't know how to move beyond.
Well, there's also people that
Communion.
they want the
And I was going to say,
but they don't want the
but they don't want to do the sacrifice. But is that pleasing to him? Is it pleasing to him to come in and you've lived every way and you've done all your stuff and you haven't taken the time to say, that's why it should be daily. That's why we we sacrifice daily. It's not just a Sunday morning thing. It's an everyday, God, I die. Please forgive me. Whatever it is you've got to lay down so that you can give him that worship and that praise that is sweet and pleasing unto him.
Just like praise and worship, it's not a one-time act. It's a way of life.
Absolutely. It's an all day, every day. All right. And so this was placed in the tabernacle specifically in the holy place, but before the veil. And then it means perpetual offering representing the prayers of worship and the people rising to God. And so that's what it could have looked like. 1.5 feet by 1.5 feet by 3 feet tall. And now, what was the difference in this? But from the first one, what it was overlaid. Did y'all hear what this one was overlaid with? This was overlaid with gold. I forget. So the first one was bronze, and now he's moved to gold, which is more precious. It's a more precious, pure, yes, metal. All right, and then we're going to move through. Once I put it in the slide form, it just. Sorry, y'all. Okay, next one after that was Joshua at Mount Ebal. And we're not going to read through, but the significant there was he built it according to Moses' command, and he used it for covenant renewal, sacrifices, blessings, and curses read before the people. And then Gideon
And here we have one that was named in Judges 6 and 24. And it was Jehovah Shalom, the Lord is peace. And I know y'all have heard us say that. He is the Lord of peace. And it was built after the angel of the Lord appeared to him, and it represents peace and God's calling. So we have Jehovah Shalom there. And then Samuel built one in 1 Samuel 7:17, and this was his personal altar for worship and intercession. We should have our personal altars. And then David in 2 Samuel 24, 1 Chronicles 21. This was built to stop God's judgment after David's, I don't know why that got cut off of there. We're about to go out, though. Built to stop God's judgment after David senses the location becomes the site of Solomon's temple. Now, am I correct in saying that Solomon's temple, this location, is where Jacob put the pillar after the dream? Is that the same location? Does anybody know? There's one of these altars is exactly the same place, and I meant the threshing floor. Sorry, y'all. If y'all knew all the things that I was trying to research to get all this down, and just to scale it down so that we could get through it. I can. I thought that Solomon's temple was built on one of these locations of an altar. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it may not be this one. I'm sorry, y'all. I didn't mean to get off on that. It was with Abraham. It was one of the ones with Abraham. So that's Bethel. Oh, Mount Moriah. Yeah, it's Mount Moriah. It's where Jehovah Jireh, the Lord, will provide. So this is in that same area, evidently, near Mount Moriah. I will double check and get that back. Make sure that I'm correct. I do not want to say anything that is not correct. All right, so this is David after the plague and the threshing floor, and he built to stop God's judgment after the census. And this is also where it's going to become the site for Solomon's temple. All right, and then Solomon, he builds the temple altar when he rebuilds the temple. And it's the central altar in the temple. Fire from heaven consumes sacrifices, and God's glory fills the temple. And then we have Elijah at Mount Carmel in 1 Kings 18:30 through 39. He restores the altar of the Lord here. Fire falls from heaven, proving that God is true and Baal is false. So that's the whole, they're cutting themselves, and then he throws the water on there. It's the whole story. If you don't know that story where Elijah's basically sitting back watching all them go crazy, trying to prove that Baal is the true and living God, and he's not. Yes, absolutely. And then, all right, and then the ones after the exile. So these are altars that were built after the exile. Zerubbabel and Joshua. And Ezra 3:2 and 3. They rebuilt the altar after return from exile to restore sacrifices before the temple was rebuilt. And then the prophets and symbolic altars during Malachi's time. Malachi condemns polluted offerings. The Israelites like to go astray and wander and
do stupid stuff, um, like worship other gods. After he proves himself over and over and over again, Malachi condemns that, and he's pointing to the need for true worship and anticipating the coming Messiah as the pure sacrifice. So he's starting to, he's a prophet, and he's starting to prophetically proclaim that the true and living Messiah is coming. Now, here's a summary of the names of the altars, the ones that were named. Jehovah Jireh, the Lord will provide. El Elohe Israel, God, the God of Israel. El Bethel, God of the house of God. Jehovah Nisi, the Lord is my banner. And Jehovah Shalom, the Lord is peace. What time is it? Do we make it? Yes. The Lord is peace. Now, like I said, yes. Right, right. Same place. Yeah, it's really cool if you go to look, like where the ark is, they're saying that's Turkey, like where the Noah's ark, so his altar would have been in that area. And they've actually dug, you can see pictures where they've, I don't know what's that called, excavated out, and they're saying, is this where Noah built his altar to the Lord and all that. It's really cool. And then they find big, huge stones with carvings on it of like the animals coming out of the boat, like coming off. It's like pictographs that have been drawn or carved in these stones. So that's really cool. There's a lot. There's so much. This is so much, and we just had to stay focused on the fact that we're talking about altars today. We're talking about altars today. But tomorrow we're going to bring it to New Testament, and not tomorrow, next Sunday. We're going to bring it to New Testament and nowadays, and we're going to get into why all this is significant. All right? Spoken Scripture September. Raise your hand if you've done your Spoken Scripture September. We're gonna be, we're gonna have some accountability. Awesome. So, please continue and share that, guys. Share it. Hashtag it or put it out on your thing. Tag the ark in it. Let's all go worship. Hopper in 10.